So I call it the employeepreneur. You are an employee, but then you're also an entrepreneur at heart as well.
Mm. Hello, and welcome to Mornings with Joel, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. Hello, we'd like to welcome you to the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We're excited here today. We have Tywan Anthony in the house and an individual that is actually handling property management at scale. And that's something that very few people have been able to do. And we're going to dive in and talk to him a little bit about that today and some other things that you can learn as it relates to how you can handle different types of assets. And we'll find out from his background related to retail and other areas how that can take place and what he's up to, because he's doing some exciting things. So Anthony, Tywan rather, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here today. How's everything going?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Going well. Here in Brooklyn, it's a rainy day out today, but all is well. Kids are back in school now, so been dealing with that, but things are well. We're blessed. Couple projects in the pipeline, but things are well. Things are rolling.
All right, good. Well, hey, we're happy to have you here today. It's kind of exciting because, you're in the largest housing authority basically in the country. So there's a lot of assets there. But I did want to ask one question just to kind of set this up, because you're with you're with NHS. And I wanted to ask you, what's really the difference between NHS and NYHA, which is the New York Housing Authority?
Gotcha. So the difference, so when you talk about NYCHA, they are a public housing authority, right? So NYCHA, that's owned by New York City. That is housing, subsidized housing for low income individuals. At NHS is separate, completely separate of that, and it's a nonprofit organization that's focused on home ownership opportunities and business opportunities for the community, right? So so two different things. And at NHS, what I do, and I'll just jump into it.
Hmm.
So I'm the director of property management there, and I've been there for a long time. I've been there for about 4 months now, right? Um, and and
Okay.
and it's been great. And I've been tasked with basically hitting the ground running in terms of property management, not only to oversee our property management department, but also to educate as well. And I think that's important for a nonprofit like NHS to make sure that you're creating an impact in the community in multiple ways, not only just with actual assets, right? You're trying to get individuals to understand, to be homeowners and get financially strong. But then also we're educating property management and real estate professionals as well. And what that means is, so we created a series of classes that takes place in colleges throughout New York City.
Okay.
These classes last for about a month and a half to 2 months, some. And we just give individuals education of all aspects of property management, from financing to budgeting to working with vendors to recurring service contracts, to legal stuff, to everything. And when they're done, they graduate and they have a little mini graduation that they can bring their family and friends to and feel good about that. But the most important thing is now they have something to say that, listen, I have a baseline education in property management. They can do one of two things. So for me, I'm big on what I call the employeepreneur, right?
Mhm.
And what that means is for individuals, you don't come from much. You weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Daddy or mommy didn't give you $500,000 to start your own business. You got to
Mhm.
work for it.
Right.
The only thing you can do is work for it. So you go to work for a property management company or whatever interest you have, and you
Mhm.
build your way up. You become financially savvy and you save your money, and then you can either transition that into your own business, or while you're working there, you can have your own business as well. It's about being smart. So I call it the employeepreneur. You are an employee, but then you're also a entrepreneur at heart as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Have you found many people use that as a methodology to transition into, quitting their jobs and owning real estate directly?
So what I'll say is this, most people, their dream is I'm going to hit the lotto, I'm going to hit it
Mhm.
big, or I'm going to have all these rental units and I'm going to quit my job, right?
Right.
I like to look at things in a slightly different way. I'm going to say I don't want to quit my job. If you really love what you do, because your
Hmm.
job pays you to learn, right? When you have an employee and when you're employed in an area in a sector that you want to do business in, like I love real estate, no
Hmm.
matter what, and I'm employed in real estate, and I learn different things within my employment with NHS that I necessarily may not see or learn on my own. Don't get me wrong,
Hmm.
you'll learn. So I think the point of it too, in some aspects, some people say, listen, I'm gonna, man, I'm gonna hit this lick and I'm gonna quit. And that's cool, to each their own.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to note that while you're at your job, you
Hmm.
learn, you grow, right? So if you can handle it, if you can, handle your schedule and be organized enough to do your job and also become an entrepreneur
Hmm.
for as long as you can, I would suggest do that. Build that nest egg, build that comfortability. So when it comes time, if you truly do want to quit your job, if your business is booming that much, right, you're doing it in a concise and clear and good way.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, no, that makes sense. I mean, there's no reason necessarily to quit. Things are going well, and like you said, if you're able to handle both, and that makes a good point because a lot of people, they can't handle both, and they're
Mhm.
always worried about getting the calls about the toilet that's backed up in the middle of the night
Mhm.
and that type thing, and how do you deal with that? But it's interesting to be able to juggle both things, which shows you really have to have the skill in
Mhm.
order to be able to do
Of
it
course,
without having to, quit your job and make it a
of course.
full-time job of just managing properties from that standpoint. So let me ask this: what do you think is the biggest area where people fall down as it relates to property management?
Setup.
Okay.
Right? So even in our class, in our current classes right now, we get a ton of students, and a lot of the students aren't first-time homeowners or multifamily owners, or these are individuals. I have one guy, he, in the class, he owns 75 residential units and maybe about 25,000 square feet of commercial space,
Hmm.
right? And he's in the class and he's learning stuff for the first time. So I think most people will slip and fall in regards to the setup. And what that means is most people will say, all right, I'm just going to manage this property. What
Hmm.
system are you using? What dashboard are you using? What software are you using? How are you making your life easier? When that phone call comes in, is it going to you as the owner? It shouldn't be, right? So I think it's important for them to have that initial setup and what that setup looks like before they even manage their first commercial space or before they even manage their first unit. And I would say for me, I wouldn't have known or understood this until I worked for a large scale commercial firm, right? So I worked for, one of the largest REITs in the country, a real estate investment trust. And that's all they did is, specialize in commercial real estate. And just understanding and going through the systems that they use, creating a budget, drafting the budget, implementing your budget, managing your CapEx projects. Those systems really help, and those systems will change the way you do business. And if you
Right.
change the way you do business, that will change how much money you keep in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. And just to define terms for some of the newer ones, the commercial real estate, what do you mean by CapEx?
Oh, sorry about that. So a CapEx is what they call capital expenditures,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So a capital expenditure project is something that's planned. So you have a few different buckets.
Hmm.
And mind you, this is just, in commercial real estate terms
Yep.
mainly. You have your regular repairs. Oh, my roof is leaking. Let me repair that. That's not a CapEx. A CapEx is my roof is damaged. I'm going to do a complete replacement. You've solicited bids, and it's a
Hmm.
more stringent, long-term planned out process. So that's the difference between a CapEx and a repair. A repair can, your guy can go there and he can maybe take care of it in a few hours, if not a day.
Right.
A CapEx project, and major in its replacement. So you're talking about complete roof replacements, facade replacements.
Hmm.
They taking off the facade and putting on a new facade. And one of the most commonly, CapEx projects are parking lots, a mill and pave. You have
Yep.
the parking lot, they mill it, they take it up 3 inches about,
Hmm.
and they repave it and they restripe it.
Hmm.
Those are where CapEx, and you have some off CapEx projects as well too that may fit into miscellaneous projects. But for the most part, you're talking about complete roof replacements,
Right.
complete facade replacements, and complete parking lot replacements.
Yeah, yeah, very good. And just for again our listening audience, how does that differ from OpEx? Because those are two terms that people I found get confused, OpEx and CapEx.
Really, it's it's interesting. So what I'll say is this. and looking at it, it's how it's also billed back as well. So
Hmm.
here's the thing. So for a lot of individuals who may not know, um, and I'm going to get into some more financial budget stuff, but not to get too deep, right?
Yep.
So when you're talking about your capex, that those expenses, kind of like your normal repairs, are bill or you can bill that back to the tenant. So
Hmm.
every year, it's called CAM, which is your common area maintenance, and you can bill some of these
Right.
expenses back through CAM to the tenant.
Hmm.
Now, for us, when we're moving things around, we can bill it back within 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, however you do it. Again, you just have to be careful because you don't want to do $1 million roof project, right? And then
Hmm.
bill all of that back by the end of the year. So you have to do an amort schedule. Just like how your mortgage, you have a 30-year
Right.
mortgage and you pay it over 30 years. CapEx project, you can pay it back over 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And
Hmm.
every tenant is billed their pro rata share, right? Of whatever it is. So if you have, two tenants, and I'm just going to be very simple. If you have two tenants for 100,000 square feet space, each their pro rata share is 50%.
Right.
So if a roof project comes in for $1 million, one tenant will get billed 500K. The other tenant will get billed 500K. It's up to their pro rata share, and that's how you bill tenants back for large scale projects.
And just for our listening audience as well, so OpEx would be operational expenses
There
that
you
are
go.
unrelated to repairs to the property from that standpoint. So OpEx
Correct.
and CapEx,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
So good to know. Good to know. And you said that the setup is generally the biggest thing where people drop the ball. Do you think people should use that for smaller properties as well? You know, you have the folks that are out there where they have small apartment buildings, maybe 6 units, 10 units. We're seeing a lot of individuals trying to get into that space. They used to be fix and flippers, and they're kind
Mhm.
of graduating a little bit. Do you still need to be as focused on setup with smaller assets as well?
All right, so you're asking that question of somebody who's big on setup. So and you're asking somebody who I teach a class tonight, and we're going to talk about setup. Actually, my class tonight is about being a commercial property manager. That's the class that I'm teaching
Mm,
tonight at St. Francis College, which is located in downtown Brooklyn.
mm,
Um, in short, yes. And you have now software that speaks to smaller units and smaller scale landlords. So, for example, Yardi. Yardi is
mm,
is one of the large scale, property management softwares that people use. Now they have what's called Yardi Breeze, which is set up for smaller scale operations. You know, people use a lot of Excel spreadsheets and things of that nature, but I always say you have to have. So, for example, I've used Salesforce before, right? Everybody's pretty much familiar with Salesforce. This stuff is needed because where do you keep your leases? If
yeah.
you have a dispute with a commercial tenant, how quick can you get to that information? Can you do a quick search
Mm,
and look for and go to the maintenance section of that 125-page lease, right? So the setup with technology now has made everything so much easier to be organized and to remain organized. Even AI has, there are implications where AI can help individuals if you're a single, owner, can give you a feel and a look of a 10-person team. So you utilizing technology and having a good setup and mimicking that setup. Remember, but I always say consistency is key. And it
mm,
can work for you and it can work against you. Here's a quick example. You have a leak. You have a small leak inside of a large scale commercial space. It just leaks a little bit every day, but it's consistent. That leak keeps leaking. Days go by. A couple weeks go by. Keeps leaking. A couple months go by. What do you think will happen in 2 to 3 years of that consistent leak keep leaking? You're going to have a major problem.
yeah.
That's on the adverse side. On the positive side, if you're consistent in positive habits, right, then you'll start to build up that habit and it'll become a part of your DNA and how you operate. So I would say, get your technology, get your tools together. Now, if you have 1 unit, treat that 1 unit like it's 100 unit. And when you have 100 units, it's going to be no problem and you'll be able to scale up quick.
Yeah, yeah. Good points. Appreciate that. Now, you talked a little bit about your background, and usually on this show, you know, multifamily winds up being a discussion, but you mentioned about retail, and you mentioned about, let's start with this. You mentioned about your love for open air shopping centers. Why that? What's so attractive about open air shopping centers, and is that something that clients need to look at in
Of
this
course,
particular
so I'll
market?
say this. Tradition really don't see when people talk about commercial real estate, it's always large scale multifamily, things of that nature.
Hmm.
Very, you don't often hear people talk in terms of shopping malls, shopping centers, industrial spaces, things of that nature. I started out my career in residential, then moved over to medical and office. And then I was with one company, and that's when I started my career in open air strip malls and shopping centers.
Hmm.
I remember when I was a kid, a little older, I always used to wonder, how does a mall operate? How does a shopping center operate? Who owns it? Who runs it? And I never knew.
Yeah.
Um, Most of the time, shopping centers here in the United States are bought by REIT, and they have large amounts of money, millions, if not billions of dollars, to buy these large scale assets. So I would say, just from the scale of the initial investment, a lot of smaller real estate investors were always excluded from that because they looked at it as something I can't do. I have a small group out here in New York, and they started doing the same thing. And they started out very, very small, buying, 3 to 4 unit shopping centers in the Midwest,
Hmm.
upstate New York. They were able to do that. And regardless of what people think, I know a lot of folks, oh, the shopping center, business is dead, but it's not. There are a lot of REITs that are doing very well because most of their shopping centers are grocery anchored.
Yeah.
Food Lion, Aldi's, a grocery store, a Target.
Hmm.
Those places will never go out of business, and they will always generate foot traffic. And then from there, you can start to have what's called destination locations as well, where you can't necessarily order offline, right? Where you have to physically go into a space. Restaurants, right? Even though I know restaurants is a tough business, but if you have a good restaurant, that's a destination,
Yeah.
right? Me and my wife, we look for date nights, yeah, right? Every other
Hmm.
Friday, you want to go somewhere. You want to get out the house. The kids are around here driving us crazy, so we want to get away from them. We drop them off,
Yeah.
and we go eat. And
Hmm.
most of the time, you go eat at a destination. That destination is inside of a strip mall. While you're there, a gym, a lot of gyms,
Hmm.
Planet Fitness, are now starting to pop up inside of malls. If you
Hmm.
couple a gym next to a grocery store, that is automatically gonna generate a ton of foot traffic. You have a doctor's office in there. You have different things. You can start to be creative at how you look at the spaces.
Yeah, yeah. And the key that you brought out there is things that can't be handled online. They do have some telehealth, but it ain't really the same as going to see a doctor. Most people when they buy their groceries, they want to physically look at, especially if you're buying meats and
Of
things like
course.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You
And
want
that's
to
what I say.
physically
You,
touch
you,
and
you got
feel.
a doctor, go to your doctor appointment, right? Right. It's funny. I had a doctor appointment just the other day, and yeah, if you have, familiar with your doctor and there's something, you got a lump on your head or something, you can call your doctor in. But
Right.
but but for the most part, most of us, we want to physically see our doctor. Hey, doc, I'm
Yeah.
not feeling well, right? And those places are, you have now a lot of emergency, a lot of those emergency medical places,
So,
those 24-hour places. If you notice, a lot of those are based inside of open air shopping centers as well,
hmm.
strip centers. And it's a reason for that. If you have that, they're going to have employees there. If you
Hmm.
have a food restaurant, Chipotle or, Raising Cane's or something like that, if you have that there, that's foot traffic already. You have a gym. So you have to be strategic and rethinking the way and how you have these tenants in your spaces to create foot traffic as well.
Yeah, yeah. What differences would you say really exist between property management for retail, open air malls and things like that and multifamily? So if people wanted to kind of gravitate into that, what are some of the things that they need to keep in mind that might be a little different?
I'll say the first thing is going to be lease structure, right? So
Okay.
multifamily, what leases are 1 year, 2 year max, and that's what you kind of want. You don't, you're like, I don't know about this tenant, but
Yeah.
for retail, you want to lock that tenant into an 8, 10, 15 year term,
Yeah.
because you want to make sure that you can expect that cash flow. And the leases are going to vary in what you're responsible for as an owner.
Hmm.
And then so, for example, roof, who's responsible? What can the tenant repair? What are you to repair? kind of when you have residential tenants, is pretty much you're responsible for everything. In that lease, certain times, you as the landlord, you're responsible maybe for the roof, and that tenant is responsible for
Mhm.
everything inside their space, the build out, the initial build out. Most of the time, if you have a white box place and a space and somebody wants to rent that unit, you'll negotiate. You'll give them a tenant allowance, which
Mhm.
allows them to do a build out, a custom build out to their space, and maybe you'll reimburse them up to a certain threshold, right?
Right.
So I think for retail, it's just a different mix
Mhm.
because you have to understand and look at things slightly different than from residential. And then if you're in residential contingent, especially if you're here in New York City, do you have a tax credit building? Do you have to abide by low income
Mhm.
affordable housing? That's a whole different skill set as opposed to retail and having that. So it's interesting, right? You have to look at it in residential is where they live. This is where
Mhm.
people come, it's where they live. Commercial is where people come to do business and do transactions. And normally I like it because you can get involved with the Merchants Association, local bids, which are business improvement districts, and everybody has an interest in
Mhm.
it. These commercial assets, a lot of the times, contingent on what town you're in, these are hubs. These are major hubs. These are major economic drivers.
Mhm.
So local elected officials and local stakeholders, they're going to be interested in what's happening at your facility and what's happening there. So just that bag of mix too. Just thinking about that as you buy a retail asset or as you buy a residential asset.
Right, right. And offline, you were talking about how politics and things like that come into play. And this is not a political show, so I don't want to dive into that. But what are some things that you need to kind of keep in mind? Because you in a lot of cases will own a property more than 2 to 4 years, but yet and still administrations can change in those 2 to 4 years. So what are some things that as a property manager people need to keep in mind as it relates to politics?
And one thing I say is, you can. You can manage your way from a bad building, but it's going to be tough to manage your way out of a bad area.
Hmm.
And you have to understand what's happening locally. I think it's imperative as a property manager, you have to build those relationships with the local elected officials in different ways. It helps for permitting, right? If you're doing something that involves getting permits, and I'll give a quick story. We were doing a large scale roof replacement, a multi-million dollar roof replacement for one of our assets. And the permitting process and getting that was going to be very tedious. But I already had a relationship with the local Department of Buildings guy. I sat on the board for the bid, which is the business improvement district there, and just having that relationship really helps sometimes because they can give you guidance on what to do and what not to do and what to file and what not to file. And I think sitting on those boards and being tapped in with the local electeds, you know what's coming up. You know what developments are happening. How's that going to affect your property? So, and looking at different laws and legislation as well. So being involved politically, I think on a real estate aspect, on a real estate level, is not, I don't like this candidate and I'm not going to vote for this candidate because their policy of whatever foreign or local domestic issue. But it's more or less being whatever side of the aisle you fit on, them knowing you that this is your property and you're tapped into the community and you're involved and you're here for the long haul and you're invested. And that means going to the community board meetings, going to visit the mayor's office and just speaking with them and say, hey, my name is Joel Miller. I own this strip center down the block. If there's anything that you want to do, I'm big on community.
Hmm.
Big on community. As soon as I graduated college, I joined the NAACP and joined my community board, and I was there. So
Hmm.
developing the relationships, I told them you can have a fair, you can have a summit, you can have a festival in our parking lot. The fire department came and one of our properties, they pulled up their fire trucks and they had a car wash as a
Okay.
donation, right? Those things they build good rapport. So it's not necessarily being I'm going to vote for you or not vote for you because of this piece of legislation, but it's more or less saying I'm here and I'm invested in this community for the long haul, and I want to do good by the people that live here.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Those are all good ideas because that increases the value of the property as well.
What's
If
it
people
does?
think where they are is a good place and a fun place. So that's really good to know. And one thing I would be remiss if well let me cover two things before we end the show as it relates to property management at scale, because there's a difference between one rental property and doing what you guys do from that standpoint. Other than setup, is there anything else that people need to know if they're going to be effective in growing from being the one property owner into person that can manage multiple assets, commercial assets?
Yeah, so the initial setup, also numbers, right? So I think it's
Mhm.
important to understand budgets.
Okay.
Actually, it's imperative to
Understand your
understand.
numbers.
Yeah, you have to know the numbers, right? So if you're managing 100 units, so there are a couple terms you should know. You should know what your NOI is,
Mm.
right? Your cash on cash returns.
Yeah.
Understanding if you're in the acquisition process, understanding what the DCRE, which is the debt coverage ratio,
Mm.
that sort of stuff. So there are certain real estate formulas that you should know, and you
Mm.
should understand and know how it works in your property. So if somebody, if there's a owner or somebody that asks you what the NOI of your property is, you should be able to understand that. You should be able to know that. So I would say in addition to the initial setup in those, in those documents, you should also have an understanding of how to create your budget and how to be effective at your budget and being able to understand and explain variances in that budget, right?
Mhm.
So most budgets will give you anywhere from a 3 to 5% give or take threshold, right? Meaning that you could come within 3 to 5% of not hitting your budget or hitting your budget, and there's no explanation needed. But anything more than that, you need to be able to actively be able to articulate what was the variance for?
Mhm.
Why? Why do you have a variance? And being able to forecast, right? Being able to forecast what the budget is for the next year. You have to know your properties well. You have expenses, how much you're going to spend on electrical, gas. Do you have any CapEx plan, any OpEx plan? Repairs, permits, things of that nature. So I think you more so than anything, you have to have a really good threshold on the numbers and how your property works in regards to those formulas. Being able to create the budget, implement the budget, and explain the budget as well is going to be very, very important as well. Um, and other that, I would also say know how your building systems work. Again, I'll tell anybody, you don't have to be an expert, but you should be inspecting your properties as often as you can. And you should be able to understand some baseline electrical, baseline plumbing, baseline roofing. Again, you don't have to be an expert. I mean, you could take a couple Home Depot classes Saturday morning and they could tune you up pretty good. But you should at least be able to have a basic understanding of how your alarm system works, how your sprinkler system works, how it's all connected. That stuff is very important because it will cost you money in the long run.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're really describing is a blend between property management and asset management. What's really the distinction between the two, and why are you blending the two? I think there's a very good answer to that.
Yeah, that's a good. I think that as a good property manager, you
Hmm.
have to be an asset manager.
Hmm.
And I would say as an asset manager, you don't necessarily have to be a good property manager because when you're and here's the two everyone knows. When you're a property manager, you're dealing with the day to day. You're in the weeds.
Right.
You're dealing with you're speaking with tenants, getting cursed out by tenants, getting cursed out by vendors. You're on the clock. You're on a deadline. You're running around. You are the quarterback. You're the
Hmm.
quarterback of that property. Everything flows to you, and you distribute as you can. You're responsible for your budget, and you're responsible for sticking to that budget. Now, contingent on where you are, if you could create the budget, implement it. Now, you normally report up to the asset manager, and
Hmm.
the asset manager is the one who really, really, really looks at the budget, and they're the ones, and that's what they're focused on. They're looking at the asset from a financial standpoint.
Hmm.
Most of the time, that asset manager, they're reporting up to the vice president, right? So everything you do as a property manager, the capex, what's the recovery on it? You report that up to the asset manager, and the asset manager may or may not roll that up into other regions and into other properties, and they'll create a general report. So if you are like me and you like walking roofs and you like jumping on top of stuff and jumping over gates and going in sewers and basements and walking in floods, property management is the way. And then if
Hmm.
you just want to deal with the numbers, asset management. Now, I'll say the best property managers and the best owners, they merge the two.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think if you could effectively merge the two, which is what I love to do, A lot of large scale companies and a lot of REITs will ask their
Hmm.
property managers to also be asset managers too. If you are creating budgets and explaining variance, that is a piece of asset management, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you're doing. And you also have to be knowledgeable about leasing as well too. You have to understand, how the leases are being signed and how that impacts your bottom line as well. If somebody's leaving early, right? We all know nationally, Party City, they filed for bankruptcy not too long ago,
mhm,
and they pulled out of most of their locations, especially here in the Northeast, and they left large vacancies of 50, 40, 30,000 square feet of spaces out. What do you do with that? How do you reposition that?
yeah,
That takes property management and also the asset management mindset as well.
yeah, yeah. Very good, very good. There is certainly a reason to blend that. Let me ask this also about property management. At what point do you think about bringing that in-house, and at what point do you outsource it?
So property management in itself is a whole, right?
Mhm.
Is a whole. I've seen companies do it both ways. I've seen certain companies, they just outsource everything and they'll have like an owner's rep and that be that liaison between that third party property management. Then I've seen companies do everything in-house. Now, obviously, when you do it in-house, you're saving money,
Mhm.
right? Because obviously, if you third party it, they're tacking on a premium, and I get it. That's how they make their business, right?
Yeah.
They're tacking on a premium to that. But you're also dealing with the headache. If you are at scale, if you're at 1,000 units, 2,000 units, if you're at a million plus two, three, four, 5, 10 million square feet of commercial space, you have to look at it where you can outsource some and in-house some. So for example, you can keep in-house property managers, you pay them a salary, and then for all the littler stuff, such as snow removal, landscaping, you can third party that stuff, right? Because you're doing it at scale. And then you can say, listen, I have 2 million square feet of space that I need you to do landscaping for.
Mhm.
I need a discount because then you can do that. You can ask for a 20, 30, 40% discount because you're giving them bulk business.
Mhm.
So I think you have to look at where you are in your business and how many units you have and how much of commercial square feet you have. And you have to internally make that decision of what would be best for your bottom line and for your NOI. That's why the budget stuff is so important. How is this going to affect my NOI?
Yeah, yeah. Very good point. Very good point. All right. Well, sounds good. Sounds good. Anything else specific you wanted to cover before I pivot to one other subject?
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Just, property management is something that you're always learning. It's one of those career paths that most people you may not hear about. Most of the time when I tell people I'm in real estate, they always ask me, "Oh, can you sell me a house or rent me an apartment?"
Yeah.
I'm the wrong person you want to do, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about how to manage an asset, how to acquire an asset, and how to keep it in your portfolio, then yes, let's have that conversation. And I think individually, if you are owning real estate, whether it's your own property that you live in and that's the only one you have, to a certain extent, you are a property manager. You can't avoid it. If you want to be in real estate, you cannot avoid it. You will either have to do it yourself or third party it and keep a iron fist on that third party property management company because they will bleed you. And then
Yeah.
you have to worry about, do you want to do it in house? Because it is a headache. So I'm a firm believer in property management is, in my opinion, the gateway career path to real estate.
Mhm.
Because when you're a property manager, you learn about every aspect of the real estate business, from leasing to
Mhm.
sales to brokerage to acquisitions to
Mhm.
finance. You're a part of all those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good point. That's a good way to tie this all together in a nice little bow. And I did want to ask you something also. You're not a little kid, you're not 20 years old coming out of college,
Mhm.
but you're playing football, man. So what's the
Ah,
connection between these two? I know you
man,
didn't see
man.
that coming.
Yes, yes. So it's interesting, right? So because in addition to real estate, I love football, and it's funny because football and real estate merged for me when I was in college. So I
Okay.
was at college in this was in the Midwest,
Hmm.
when I was at Pittsburgh State University, which I'm actually going back to my homecoming October 15th. So I'm
Okay.
excited about that. They're gonna put me in the skybox too. So I'm excited
Okay.
about that. So I was at practice one day and a teammate of mine, he said, "Hey, my father came down here from South Carolina and he bought some real estate, bought some property." I was like, "Really?" I was like, Okay, right? I didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
So the next day, I went down to the county clerk's house because that's, the county clerk's office because that's where they said they got the property from. And mind you, this was a while ago.
Hmm.
So I get down there, and at the time I was a 20-something-year-old kid. I had my braids in my hair and everything, right? So I was chilling.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, "How do you buy property?" So the county clerk, she looks at me, right? And she gives me this big book. Bam, give me this big book. And I was like, "Well, what's this book? Like, what is it?"
Hmm.
And she said, "Well, these are the people that haven't paid their property taxes in a few years." And I was like, "Okay, so why are you giving me this book?" She's like, "Well, every year, contingent on how much they owe and how long it's been, we
Hmm.
put these houses up for auction." I said, "You mean you can like buy one?" She said, "Yeah, you can buy one." I said, "All right." I took the book and I left. And I
Hmm.
knew the auction was going to be like 2 months ahead. So when I was at football practice, I would leave football practice and jump right into my car and take my camcorder and record all of the properties on that list.
Okay.
Because when the auction came up, I wanted to have some information about what property I'm going to bid on. So
Hmm.
long story short, the auction comes up. I go there. I still have my braids, still have my suit and tie, and I'm the only person in my age range that even
Yeah.
looked like me that went there. And I go and sit down, and sure enough, it was a real auction. So they started auctioning off homes and houses, and I'm nervous, right? So, and one of the homes come up that I see, and I raise my hand, and they're like, "You there?" And another person in the back, they raise their hand. I'm like, "Man, this guy's trying to get my house, right?" So long story short, I ended up outbidding him, and when I left that auction, I had about like only $5,000 on me, and I was able to get two homes and a plot of land.
Wow.
Two homes. So, and I remember going up there, and this was a deed in lieu county. So
Hmm.
as soon as you pay back the back taxes, they give you, they give you a deed in lieu. So I go up there, and lady again, she's looking at me like, "What the hell is this kid doing here, man?" So she writes it out, and she tells me the address. Well, she gives me the longitude and latitude coordinates of the property. I said, "Man, can you just
Yeah,
give me
that
the
don't mean
address,
nothing.
right?"
Yeah.
And she gave me the address to the first property, and this was in Pittsburgh. It was on West 17th Street, and I remember getting that address, and I had a Mustang at the time, right? So I remember getting in my Mustang and driving it to that property and just pulling up in front of it and looking and saying, "Wow, a kid from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, knew
Hmm.
nothing about real estate, actually has a home bought, paid for, cash money in a place miles from where I grew up and lived."
Sounds
So
crazy.
that's why, yeah, and that's why real estate and football are always important to me, and that's why I still play football. As long as I'm going to do real estate, if you're right, eventually I'll transition out. But right now, I'm still in decent shape. I still like to run around it, and it's a good way to also stay in shape and stay tapped in with a lot of the younger generation. And what I try to do with a lot of the kids that are in their 20s, I try to feed them into the real estate industry, into the real estate sector. So and it's also a way of how I make an impact in my
Hmm.
community. Like I said, it's all about the community. And it's all about the impact that you make in the legacy that you live, not just for your family, but for other people. There's a quote that I live by, and it says, people will forget what you do, people will forget what you say, but people will never forget how you make them feel. That's from
Hmm.
Maya Angelou. And that's what I try to do every day, not just in real estate, but also in this nonprofit, which is called the New York Crusaders, and that's the team. We try to academically, athletically empower our players. If they can go to college, we try to set them up to do that. If they need a job, we try to set them up to do that.
Hmm.
So that's where those two things intersect.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I knew you didn't see that coming, but I wanted to
I
laugh.
didn't, I
Yeah.
didn't. I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, it's an important part of your life, so I
Of
wanted to
course,
make sure that we
of
brought
course.
that out, and and the fact that you're still active is a good thing. Like you said, it
Yeah,
keeps
man. Got to
you.
stay active, man. Now,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
the wife hates it.
yeah, yeah. Try not to break a leg.
Try not to break a leg. Try not to break a leg.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, well, it's been great having you today, man, and being able to kind of go through these points. A lot of information there, and again, people generally always focus on the negative side of property management,
Of
but they don't
course.
look at the fact that if you understand your asset from an asset management standpoint, you'll be a better property manager. And I think that's really the takeaway from today's discussion. So,
Yeah, and what I'll say too, property management is fun. It has afforded me the opportunity to know so many people, so many restaurant owners, so many business owners, so many people, right? And you build up a catalog. If you are a good property manager,
Mhm.
you will develop some solid relationships. I know people from Target. I know execs from Walmart because
Mhm.
I've managed a lot of big box commercial national tenants. I know people
Yep.
from Chipotle. All that helps. So if you're a good property manager, and it really opens up. If you're a people person, go for it.
Yeah, yeah, and that could pay dividends down the road, having those
It
relationships,
sure
without a
can. It
doubt,
sure
without a
can.
doubt. Yeah. So great having you today. Great conversation, and we certainly look forward to catching up with you offline and keeping the dialogue going. And next time you're in Atlanta, also make sure you look us up and everything else. So,
Well, I'll be there next year in August.
oh yeah, without a doubt, we'll be looking for you. So we appreciate that. And for all of you visiting with us today, this has been the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast, sponsored by Impact Mass. Thank you so much for being here today, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Joel. Have a good one.
Yep.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
The Morning for Joel CRE podcast is sponsored by ImpactMask.com. That's M as in Mary, ImpactMask.com. The world's most breathable mask that has 99% efficacy, which is higher than an N95 mask, and it won't fog your glasses. Check out the science behind these incredible masks at ImpactMask.com.